Woo. Look at the carrot. I know.
Well, all right. If everybody's here, you guys ready over there?
So,
Yep. All right, cool. Well, then will we will call the meeting to order at 5:32. There's a personnel committee meeting at 6, and so the plan is for us to handle our business by then, and if we can't, then we can always do what we need to do at the council meeting with more time, or do it another time if we can. So is there any public to address us this evening?
Nope.
Doesn't look like it. All right. Anything under staff reports?
Nope. We're gonna be ramping up for budget. There's a budget calendar that we'll talk about at the council meeting this evening.
Great. Then we can I just lost my agenda. We can move on to minutes approval from December 11th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from December 11th?
I just wanted to comment on something I was trying to say, and I don't know how clearly it comes across. This is on number 8. Basically what I was trying to say was that with this unpredictable revenue, we should not be hiring staff or thinking about staffing. I'm not sure what the best way to word that is, given what's the words that are already there, but that's what I was trying to get across. I think it was understood then, but I just wanted to clarify it. The way it reads here, Kuefner noted that he did not think staff should be included in the policy. I should just say additional staffing.
Okay.
Should not be included.
Sure. Would you like to move to approve the minutes with that change, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second? Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, we don't have any old business tonight, so we will move on to new business, and the only item of new business is the capital project transfers and ARPA allocation regarding wayfinding and signage implementation. So I will turn things over to staff. Give us an overview. Whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Yep, so we wanted to bring this to you guys now rather than later because it is time sensitive. The town had entered into a contract with a company to develop a wayfinding and signage plan. This is going to help and is consistent with our townwide wayfinding signage and position and marketing development plan. We had identified 4 different sections: parks, vehicular, downtown stores, and the village. There was a presentation that Sharon emailed out that had been given previously, just so you guys had some background info. We had gone out to bid for 2 sections, which were parks and downtown stores, and our lowest bid came in at $336,850. This bid is only good until January 28th. So if we are interested in accepting this bid, this is something we would need to move forward on now. For the past 2 years, the town has put $100,000 in each fiscal year towards a capital project for this, but clearly $200,000 is not sufficient to meet our low bid of $336,850. So based on that, staff met and tried to come up with possible ways that we can still move forward with this project. We identified $35,000 in park signage that's currently in this year's capital budget that we think can be repurposed towards the wayfinding. In addition, we annually put $50,000 towards positioning and marketing, and staff have agreed that that money could be reallocated towards the signage, that the signage is a necessary marketing tool that would be appropriate to be used from there. So after those 2 capital transfers, we would still need an additional $51,580. So staff's recommendation would be to allocate this from the ARPA money. Because some of the signage is for parks, we feel that it is in the essence of ARPA in terms of promoting outdoor spaces. So that is our current recommendation, and I will take questions from there.
My initial question is just for clarity. The ARPA, there's a paragraph in the agenda item summary around our unallocated ARPA dollars, and So it says there's currently $1.8 million in our ARPA funds that have yet to be expended. And of that, about 840,000 is yet to be appropriated and obligated for specific use. Is that inclusive of whatever the remainder of the $750,000 that was set aside for Parks and Rec, or is that additional on top of those
I
dollars?
believe that 700 and change would be included in the 1.8, but not the 840.
I would
Got it.
agree with that.
So
The
in
840
go ahead.
mostly consists of the money that the council put towards revenue replacement, which again will need to be allocated to a specific cost before it can be spent.
And if the council approves this additional expenditure out of ARPA, would whenever we get a plan or recommendations for how to spend the remainder of the Parks and Rec piece, would, in your mind, this be subtracted out of that total the way some of I know we paid for some of the consultant work and other things, the master planning, and some other bits and pieces from that 750. So would you be subtracting this additional $52,000 out of the total that we'd put towards Parks and Rec, or would you consider this, even though you're going to report this to the federal government, it's related to Parks and Recreation, would you consider this to be outside of the chunk of money that we put aside for them?
We only referenced, so it's just sort of trying to tie it to the spirit and intent of ARPA in a couple of those areas, and Amanda alluded to one was from a public health standpoint, use of open space, passive recreation, but also we could have just as easily sort of led with the economic development piece in terms of the benefit of this project. So it's kind of we just wanted to, rather than just say have ARPA funded, we wanted to briefly tie it back to under the stated purposes of the rescue plan, why we think it's philosophically consistent. But the plan wasn't, although the council could certainly talk about if that was your wish, the staff at this point was not envisioning or recommending that it be deducted from the park asset improvements pot of money specifically within ARPA.
So my last question then is, you don't think the sentence in here about it, the spirit and intent of ARPA, you're not concerned about making sure that ARPA is only funding the portion of this wayfinding that has to do with parks and outdoor spaces, because the federal government treasuries require, you have some parameters. You can't spend ARPA on anything that the town spends money on. It has to be more specific than that. And parks and outdoor resources is one of the things, because it ties back into public health. So I guess what I'm saying is, would you be, when you report back to the federal government, just reporting, hey, we did a wayfinding project, or would you be sort of breaking off the piece of that project that has to do with parks as the allowable ARPA expenditure?
Because we received less than $10 million and we chose revenue recovery loss, we can actually spend ARPA on anything in the entire world as long as it is a governmental expenditure. So I would consider this a qualifying governmental expenditure, and I would report it to ARPA as a revenue loss project that was used towards wayfinding and signage.
Revenue loss.
That was one of the 4 ARPA buckets that you were allowed to select. Revenue recovery was one of
In a
them.
town our size, we didn't, but we could have said we were going to use 100% of our $7.5 million for revenue loss recovery, and just kept it simple and not. We elected to tie the majority of it to some of the specific eligible use categories.
Does anyone on the committee have questions? I see your hand, Brian.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Just to recap this, we have 200,000 on account from the last 2 fiscal years we put aside.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 200,000.
Mhm.
We need 386, something like that.
336, yeah.
336.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
So on that, related to what Brian's just asking, you said we're gonna take 50, I can't remember the numbers exactly, 50 from current signage. So what are we losing? And I'm gonna ask the same thing about the marketing. What are we losing? You're yanking that money out of those pockets.
So Parks and Rec had some signage that they were planning to do. That was the first pot, 35. They said that they are in a position where they could wait to do that work later if we were to consider putting it into the fiscal year 25.
Do you know what
budget.
it was? I mean, Do we have any idea?
Not offhand, the specific signs that were part of that
Okay,
35, yeah.
that's- But something's getting dropped that had been a priority, that had been budgeted, that had been planned for. And then what's the other, marketing? What was the
Position and
mar-
marketing, so they have money allocated to them each year, and they have some money carrying forward from prior years where they feel that this money, they don't.
They is
Um,
also rec?
Nope, this was, I believe it's Cynthia from the Downtown Partnership, and our communications, specialist has this pot of money is theirs for, positioning and marketing. So because they have some money carrying forward from prior years, they feel that at this time they can release these funds.
And also within, we believe that this sort of meets the definition of that pot of money. You know, it's not about like, well, we're not gonna use this for positioning marketing, we're gonna use it for wayfinding. We think that this could be
Tied in.
part of that strategy.
What it doesn't address to me is and I don't really know, all I did was I looked at the, I can't get two things up on these things at the same time. But the, phase 1, phase 2. Now, they had about 10 signs for each. I don't know if actually 40 signs get put in for each or what, but, it just seemed like, well, we budgeted 200,000, let's stick to budget. And this is my bias, is let's stick to budget and take it where it takes us. Definitely do phase 1, if that's what we want to do. I listened to their presentation. I agreed with something you said. I'm not clear whether this park sign includes it or not, but you mentioned now I've forgotten exactly, the Mansfield Hollow, the tone of the signs and the nature of the signs and the, you know, and my feeling about them, they're just so like, blah, here we are again. And, you know, I'm in the woods, I'm going to a park and boom, there's this big thing there. The other weird thing, and that's not really what you said, but the gist of it was,
It's
it wasn't in
pretty
tone. The other thing that throws me off is that's a state park. It's not a town park. So what are we doing putting signs on it? So that threw me off. Now, maybe that was just a random example the guy threw out because it's mentioned in assets of the town. I don't know, but it was definitely one of the signs I saw. If I could get it back up again, on the examples. So my bias is to $200,000 for signs is a lot of money for signs. Let's do it. Let's see where it gets us. Maybe these guys aren't the way to do it. Maybe frankly, the way to do it is to get some temp workers who want to be doing this kind of thing in town. Is that a ridiculous management thing? I don't know. But maybe that's the way to go rather than contract it out and have to pay the varieties of overhead that come along with that. So, and I don't know that we're in any great rush.
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, there's a number of things to consider. I think, to emphasize this was, I believe it was the lowest qualified
Mhm.
bidder. So there were definitely costs north of here. I think that the cost, it's not gonna come down. It's only gonna, so any delay on, basically, I guess you're saying if we have $200,000 for phase 1, the total cost is somewhere in the neighborhood of 120. So I guess you're proposing doing phase 1 and sort of,
I'd propose to spend $200,000, take it where it takes us. I mean, that given, this is, as I've mentioned to you in the past, Ryan, this is not the signs stuff is a touchy area for me. I think a lot of this stuff is done on, people do it on their phones and so forth. I understand the look, I understand the image idea. I'm not as into that as, I'm into presentation. I just don't really feel that.
So
We look at each one, I could tell you this on that one, this on that one. I have different opinions on each kind of, and each thing, but anyway.
So maybe the question we could pose, Chris, with that statement is, in terms of the project, just sort of looking at what the presentation that we got, which is from a couple of years ago. There's a lot of stuff in
recent
it
one was a
that-
year ago, 11 months ago.
Right, so there was a lot of stuff that was sort of aspirational, including making sure that eventually, at least, we work with the university and with the state park on university signage to make things all sort of look the same. So in terms of what the scope of this project that you've bid out is the one that we're being asked to consider the over expense on. What are we getting in terms of, because it's not every sign in town, it's only certain portions of them, is that right?
Yeah, so the phase one, it's a
Downtown.
combination of downtown and signs for our park properties.
Okay, so we're not yet replacing border signs and state park sign, the Mansfield Hollow Park, and we're not yet having, approaching the part of the project where Yukon and us try to work together to come up with common language and points on their signs and our signs. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and Cynthia will be on hand tonight, so as far as like within the downtown budget. Okay, I'm pulling this up now. I mean, I think the short answer to your question is no, like, for instance, the mock-up of Mansfield Hollow State Park or Mansfield Hollow Historic District, these would not be in that category. In terms of like the downtown piece and Yukon assets that are in the downtown, like the Ballard or whatever, I guess I'm hedging a little bit on that.
No, I meant more that there was a conversation, I think, at that presentation where some of the directional signs that you drive along the road and there's a sign that says Yukon this way.
Yeah.
University of Connecticut straight, Stores straight, that we would replace those with other things. That some of that at least would require collaboration with the university, who also has wayfinding signs up, to campus.
Parking garage.
It doesn't sound like that's in scope for this project. That's right. It's just the downtown and the parks.
It wasn't my impression, Ben, but
Yes.
that,
Yeah.
I think that statement's accurate.
If I may be
Okay.
correct.
Hold on a second, Brian. I haven't recognized you. Does anybody else have just,
well, to follow up on where I was going, when you get a building design, a lot of times they'll do value engineering. I would be curious to do some value engineering on this, and one simple thought is, I know it's part of the aesthetic and the design that they're trying to do. They've got these one-legged signs that then have the sign itself hanging off like a flag. And I imagine there's a look to that, but I imagine that takes a heavier foundation. It costs more money to put each one in because there's a weight going in the wrong direction. It's not all down. So
yeah, I guess
things
my
like that.
question, the point of my question, Chris, is I don't think any of that stuff is part of this project at this point. So the only
Well, I don't
thing,
know, it may be a sign for, Bicentennial Pond that stands on one leg and, causes it to have a $4,000 base. I don't know. And I don't know how many, I don't even really know how many signs this is. It's just phase one, phase two, and the list below weren't terribly clear to me. What was phase one, phase two?
So,
well, go ahead, Ryan.
yeah, so phase two is 34 signs. Phase one. With 32 signs. So some of the neighborhood, it's about 60 signs total.
And they are limited to sort of pedestrian and car parking, whatever wayfinding signs in the downtown, and
The first one.
entry signs essentially in our parks. Is that right?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a little more detail in like, so this is a sort of staff to staff document. It's still shorthand. I would need to open this up but so like within the downtown parking, kiosks, and pedestrian, which is phase one. So there's 6 informational kiosks, which are post and panel. There are 3 what they're called parking trailblazers mounted on existing poles. There are 4 parking trailblazers mounted on new poles. There's
Sure. You
parking
don't
lot
need to-
identification, a garage identification. There are 5 directional pedestrian signs to be mounted on existing poles and 4 others. So I mean, I guess within each of those, I mean, I don't have an itemized granular level detail to show each sign mocked up in terms of where it's physically going to be. Obviously, the the vendor has that detail, but in this spreadsheet, I don't have that.
Using those two numbers. he's
Hold on a
given-
second, Chris. Chris, hold on. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a comment. Really, I have an issue with the complete design. It's more like a boilerplate template thing. I don't like the looks of the signs themselves. It's hard to support, a project when it's, they're kind of ugly. That may be in my opinion, but that's how I feel.
Okay. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, that's a big piece of it, and we're making this our trademark or whatever, our brand, as the guy said on the presentation. My point was, I just took the number that Ryan gave me, $120,000 for phase one, which is what he had as a number. I don't mean to stick you with that hard, but that's what the number gave. And then you said 32, and I just did a quick division, and it's $3,600 and change, or $3,600 per sign.
And there's
$3,600 per sign
There's
on average. That's a
30,000
gross
in there
average.
That's, yeah, there's 30,000 in other, I mean, like engineering, shipping, storage, but I mean, if you want to
Yeah.
divide. yeah.
No, it's making the sign, it's the whole thing. I get it. But
Okay,
it's
so,
just-
so
So I do
my
want to say, just, I
opinion,
mean, because I think this is before Chris joined the council. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely before. So anyway, so just as a reminder, because I know this was part of the February presentation, it may or may not have been part of the slides, I can't remember, but I know that there was a recap, at least spoken recap provided. So I think definitely hear what you're saying about your own kind of view, sounds like dislike essentially for the final designs, the way they came in. This was a highly collaborative effort that was led. There were a lot of workshops, and obviously, like anything, you design by committee and so I just want to make it clear this was not a drop down from the sky by a company doing a design, that it was a lot of iterative, a lot of feedback. And the council, certainly as a body and individual members of the council had an opportunity. I think some council members did avail themselves of that to sit in on some of the workshops and just provide their own creative input.
I voted for the mulberry leaf, but I lost.
Yeah,
Someone,
that
I
would have
think
been a
Tony,
good idea.
I think Tony said it looked like poison ivy and I lost.
I don't recognize them, but yeah.
So anyway, just, I want to make sure that everybody knows that as far as the signs, the designs for the signs that were presented on last February, that were for the basis for what we went out to bid with, I mean, it was a highly collaborative process, took many, many months
Yeah.
to get there. So-
Ryan, I'm not doubting any of that. The one thing I would say counter to that is that there were 88 people, as I saw in the
Yeah.
survey, versus on the northwest Mansfield, 380 people or something like that on these things. So, I'm not concerned. People do their, I'm sure they're trying to do their best work. But I went through the same thing of kind of saying, I don't really like this design either. Just as Brian's saying, it doesn't pull me in. When we were forced to do, unbeknownst to me until we had to do it, the sign for the elementary school, which that's why I voted to have it be smaller, because it was just a little less objectionable. And it's not objectionable, a little
Well,
less. in
so,
your face.
so I appreciate all that, Chris. I think, sorry, go ahead, Carlita.
I just wanted to sound off as well. I appreciate the signage. I actually like the look of it. I understood at the time the reason for it, the marketability, come to Mansfield. All of that I was on board with. What I still can't get beyond is the urgency to make this decision on the signage right now, to allocate extra funds.
Well, so I mean, I guess, so the urgency for the funds was just, there was this project has been in the works for a while. There's been money set aside, actually you want to put out there, we're kind of a year behind, because we had put aside $100,000 a year. We thought we'd do it incrementally. And basically while we were doing that, we were told, well, I don't think you're gonna be able to do that much with 100,000. You might want to bank another year, then go out to bid. And so we were hoping that the 200 would be enough to make it a meaningful amount. So based on the council's own capital plan, the vision was to get started a year ago. So we're already kind of a year behind that. This obviously, this is a key element to the overall, plan to market our town, going back to when the whole branding exercise happened, long before even I got here. This was part of the mix, that we need to commit to the town, the council committed to wanting to, do gateway signage, wayfinding signage. Obviously, the details are what happened more recently in terms of the actual designs that came out of it. But there was, I guess, a policy decision was made that this was a priority. So as far as, doing it now versus a year from now, I mean, costs, it's gonna, whatever these numbers are, they could be 20% higher next year. And, if there was any sense that like these were inflated numbers and that it was gonna kind of come crashing down to earth and let's kind of wait, regroup, fine tune the design, whatever. But I think there's a sense here that this is really gonna, we might look back on this day and say, wow, that was a deal. So I know, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
So from my perspective, the council's approved this project. It was part of last year's budget, and the only thing that's changed is that we went out to bid, and as happens from time to time and has happened a little bit frequently, costs have increased based on the estimate that we put together a
75%.
year ago, because the world has changed and things are more expensive, and we're at the end of the day, we're budgeting, we're estimating what things are going to cost. It's an educated guess, hopefully very educated, but it's never 100% accurate. And so my perspective is the signs are the signs. I don't view my role on the council as needing to get into the level of granular detail that criticizes their specific design. We have a paid staff of people who are professional marketers, and I might have an opinion about the work that any of them do. Anybody on town staff does that maybe isn't how I would do it or how it would look, but nevertheless, there's reasons for it. And we did this branding exercise many years ago, and we still have signs that were designed in WordArt and Microsoft Office 95 on like 2 or 3 of the entrances to town that say Mansfield like this, and printed on a piece of wood. And so how much value does the branding have if all that it's printed on are business cards and on the town's website, when people drive through town and see 6 different branding exercises because the council never took the steps necessary whenever we did them in a sort of half-hearted way in the past to fully change what the sort of image brand of the town is. So again, I voted for the mulberry leaf back in 2017, and we ended up with the oak, and the oak's great. But from my perspective, I think the council's sort of made the policy decision that yes, we should move forward with the signs. If we want to revisit that decision, the question is, should we cut the project out of our budget? If we wanted to move forward with a smaller project, and only do phase 1 or something along those lines, from my perspective, I think you end up still with $1.8 million, $840,000 of which is totally unappropriated and unallocated out of ARPA that we have until the end of the calendar year now to get rolling. And so I don't see any reason why we shouldn't appropriate what we need to appropriate to complete the project as we had spec'd it out back in the spring. And I appreciate that not everybody likes the signage and thinks it's a necessary use of our town's funding. That's okay. I mean, that's been somewhat of a theme as we've done this whole branding exercises. Not everybody agrees that it's something that we should be spending significant resources on. But from my perspective, I think there's value in doing it. And I don't see any reason why we wouldn't fund the project that we agreed was worth $200,000 now that it's going to cost a little bit more money, especially because the town's identified 3 different places where we can come up with that money without having a impact or direct impact on the taxpayer. So that's my opinion on what we should do moving forward. So if somebody else agrees with that opinion, there's a motion. There's 3 of them. We can take them at once or separately, if however people want to do them. And just to make that recommendation to the council, and we can have a more detailed maybe conversation, if Cynthia's gonna be there, Ryan, about exactly what signs are getting replaced and how and when at the council meeting. Go ahead, Carlita.
Move effective January the 22nd, 2024, to approve the transfer of $35,000 from the town's capital project for park signage to the capital project for wayfinding and signage plan implementation. Move effective or do you want me?
Nope, go ahead. We can do them all at once. That's fine with me.
Move effective January 22nd, 2024, to approve the transfer of $50,000 from the town's capital project for positioning and marketing to the capital project for wayfinding and signage plan implementation. Move effective January 22nd, 2024, to authorize the use of $51,580 towards the town's wayfinding and signage plan implementation to be funded through the town's American Rescue Act plan funding.
Is there a second? I will second then. Just to note, Carlita's motions and the packet should read there. We're moving to recommend the council approve
Recommend to the council.
this. Is there any discussion?
Well,
Okay.
I would say
Go
the
ahead.
same thing I've said before, so I think I've already discussed it. I mean, there are a variety of other permutations which I would be interested in pursuing, but I'm very skeptical that when I see something like, wait a minute, you've got $35,000 in the parks budget for signs. Can we trust their budget? Why did they put that in there if they don't need it?
Well, that, I mean, Jay O'Keefe was here, he could speak to, I believe that money, that some of the very signs that this will be replacing was contemplated as part of that.
Okay.
So it is it's covering the same signs, but consolidating it in with these other numbers. So I hear what you're saying, if there was like, oh, well, I guess you didn't really need it for that purpose, but I think, I don't know, 1-for-1 overlap, there may have been
Mhm.
some jostling apart, but it is largely the same.
Is there any other discussion? All right, then let's vote. All in favor of recommending this to the town council, raise your hand. Opposed? All right, the motion passes.
I'd like it to be clear, and I'll say it at the town council meeting, I'm happy to spend the $200,000.
Okay.
That was in the budget, this is where we think we want to go, fine.
Okay.
See what it looks like, but not go whole hog.
Sure. I just remind folks, and I'll do this at the council meeting, we often have projects that are over budget. We often have projects that are under budget. And we often end the year with a significant budget surplus after it all shakes out. And so our existence here is to make sure that we're on track with the budget, and this is a budget neutral proposal because we have a project that's come in bid over budget. So anyway, all right. Motion passes. We will have this conversation again shortly at the council. Are there any communications, other business, or future agenda items?
No.
All right, seeing none, then the only thing left on our agenda is to adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn.
Seconded by Carlita. All in favor, raise your hand, and we are adjourned. All right, I will see you all in about 45 minutes. Have a good personnel meeting.
Thank you.
Bye.
You doing that in here too?